Argan Inc. is one of the most talked about small cap stocks of 2024 with a return increase of about 240%. Now, of course, the question for 2025 is Argan still a super interesting small cap stock and can it continue to grow? Let's take a look at some characteristics and features of this stock in a quick scan within our databases. Now, the Morningstar fair value estimate is only 105, while the current price is $155. I really assume that it hasn't been updated because there's still very little known about this stock, although it has indeed increased quite a bit by now. There aren't many analysts who have given a rating, so this analysis and data aren't really reliable. When we look at the historical valuation, the history of Argan Inc. actually goes back quite a ways. Suddenly we see that the recent spike does seem like an overreaction and that the stock is overvalued. If we really zoom in on, for example, 7 or 5 years, it seems to be more reasonable. We suddenly see that the recent spike does seem like an overreaction and that the stock is overvalued. If we really zoom in on, for example, 7 or 5 years, it seems to be more reasonable. So there is definitely something going on with this company, and it mainly has to do with the enormous profit growth. Argan Inc. It's actually a kind of construction company that acquires multiple construction companies, in other words, a sort of private equity/investment strategy, and with that, they hopefully achieve higher returns. And for a long time, they've been building on the foundation, not doing a whole lot of acquisitions, but now suddenly profit growth is increasing rapidly. And that profit growth for 2025, as well as for 2026 and 2027, is actually not even estimated to be super high, but it is higher than normal. Now, with the current valuation, which has risen to a PE ratio of 30, an average PE ratio of 24, align with this EPS forecast, and you could achieve an average return of 10%. However, if we look at the benchmark multiple, it actually hovers around 15, for example, 10-year benchmark multiple. Even though this higher profit growth is being realized, if the PE ratio, for whatever reason, drops to 15, you would incur a loss with Argan Inc. So the best might be behind Argan, but it still scores a strong buy on the factor analysis, as you can see here. For whatever reason drops to 15, you would incur a loss with Argan Inc. So the best might be behind Argan, but it still scores a strong buy on the factor analysis, as you can see here. And we use this factor analysis from Seeking Alpha a lot, and it is indeed a reliable indicator for potential outperformance, but with an emphasis on potential outperformance, it might be that the best is already behind us. So why does it score so high? Due to the combination of growth, profitability, but especially momentum and revisions, so the market expects that Argan will make more profit, and we also see that the failure ratio is actually estimated by the data model at 0.33. Now it's clear that manual work is needed to verify if all of this is indeed correct. The market cap is 2 billion, so it's just barely a small cap, and the total debts are actually quite manageable considering the acquisition strategy they employ, and they still have quite a bit of cash on hand. If you look at the revenue growth and also the profit growth, they are indeed very strong. And the EPS growth is also expected to be around 30% for next year. And for the long term, the estimate is actually a bit lower. But the question is how reliable this data is. So personally, I would be a bit more cautious, and I have several actually more interesting serial acquirers in mind, and I also include that in my portfolio. On the portfolio, you'll find many reviews on our YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe to stay updated on the stock portfolio development and also to access several free analyses that we, of course, share with you. Finally, the six-pack doesn't even have data on Argan, so you don't see that very often. Regarding the technical analysis, I've already mentioned that since 2024, the stock has risen very strongly by about 240%, making it one of the better stocks of the past year. If you look at the history, it goes back a long way. Now you could say, yes, the last all-time high was in 1991, but back then, Argan was of course a very different company than it is today. So, it's very difficult to determine from this level whether Argan will continue to rise or not. The factor analysis indicates that it's a strong buy. Often, this is indeed a good indicator. So here's what's going on. It's also an advantage that there are very few analysts who have reviewed and researched the company. Zegshank doesn't have this information, and there are also very few analysts on Wall Street, only 2 who have dared to make an estimate. All in all, Argan seems promising. I haven't taken a position myself because I mainly have other serial acquirers which, by the way, don't perform that well, like Advice Lab Solution is one example of that. There are a few, but 70 million, and yes, it can easily go up tenfold, but it can also go to 0. Time will tell. Regarding Argan, the question is, can it deliver returns in the long term? We'll see. It could be that the current valuation has risen a bit too much, and that too much is being bought on momentum at the moment.